All right, looks like the recording has begun, so I'd like to say welcome to everyone. Hello, this is Rebecca Dallin. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Stormwater Quality here at the City of Oklahoma City. I'd like to officially welcome everyone to our 9th installment of this Floatables webinar series. We'll begin momentarily, so I want to provide some information to help enhance everyone's experience during the presentation today. In order to reduce background noise, we ask that everyone keep themselves muted during the presentation. If you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to type them in the chat. Chris Stewart and I will be monitoring chat for questions, and we'll have our guest speakers answer as many questions as we have time for today. If anyone would like to receive a certificate of attendance for today's webinar, I'll need you to send an email to one of our staff members, Heavenly Mendenhall, and I'm going to type her email and information into chat. Oh, good. That's not readable. Why is that? I don't know. Copy and paste things. I don't know why it's hard to read. But anyway, you can see her email address in chat. And hello to Matthew. Thank you for joining us today. Okay. Each of the presentations in this webinar series will be available within a week or so after the scheduled webinar date on our website under Stormwater Workshops, in the section called Our 2021 Floatables Webinar Series. Today's session, of course, will be the September edition, and I'll post a link to that website where you can find those presentations toward the end of today's program. And we have been leaving them up, so if anyone would like to view any of the previous sessions, feel free to do that. If anyone has any questions at this time, feel free to type them in the chat. Without further ado, I will begin the very short Floatable Series welcome presentation.
Good afternoon and welcome to our monthly Stormwater Quality webinar series. This is our first attempt at a themed series, and we hope everyone is enjoying the presentations and is learning something new. Our theme for 2021, as you know, is floatables, blowable trash and materials that could or do end up in a waterway. During this series, you'll have the opportunity to hear from several different guest speakers throughout the year, including this month's presentations. We'll be rounding out the series with up-and-coming information from the city's sustainability program. This presentation in December will show how the planning department prepares for the future of our great city, including their plan to keep Oklahoma City just a little bit greener. We have also included some more traditional content throughout the series for our industrial and construction stormwater permittees, while tying those subjects into the overall theme. As we've already briefly mentioned, each of the presentations will be available online within a week or so after the presentation is aired live. It will be available on the workshops section of our Stormwater Quality website. I'll post a direct link to that page into chat toward the end of today's presentation. Some of our presentations will be live and some will be pre-recorded. We do our best to provide as much detailed, accurate information as possible while also working with the presenter's strengths and their schedule. We live and work in a beautiful community here in Oklahoma City. For more information about stormwater, what we're up to, and local regulations, be sure to visit our website.
Okay, well, up next is the main presentation for today's webinar. Today, we're going to hear from several guest speakers. Up first will be Mallory Gotcher. Mallory is the Water Conservation Manager for the City of Oklahoma City Utilities Department. Mallory and her team work with residents, businesses, and city departments to increase water use efficiency awareness and assist with implementation of best management practices. During her time with Water Conservation section, her team has been selected for the Oklahoma Water Resources Board Water for 2060 Excellence Award for the Water Conservation Plan and the Oklahoma City Beautiful Visionary Award for Local Partnerships. She has a bachelor's degree in environmental science and a master's degree in plant and soil science from Oklahoma State University. Up next will be Amelia Hudson. Amelia is the Division Manager of Compliance Planning for Raba, Kistner, Inc., located in their Dallas office. She has been with Raba Kistner for over 5 years. Prior to joining Raba Kistner, she was the environmental compliance specialist for the city of Lubbock, Texas Stormwater Department, where she managed the industrial stormwater compliance inspection program and stormwater education and outreach efforts. Amelia is a registered environmental manager, and in her current role, manages all compliance permitting and planning projects, including air permitting, stormwater and SPCC, waste generator permitting, EPCA-related reporting, and comprehensive environmental audits across the United States. Myra Lopez will be rounding out today's program. Myra is an environmental compliance specialist at Raba Kistner in Dallas, Texas. She has a bachelor's and master's degree in environmental science with a focus on policy and regulations from Texas A&M University, Corpus Christi. Myra specializes in stormwater compliance in both Texas and Oklahoma, but has experience across multiple media and with numerous environmental regulations. Again, if anyone has any questions during today's presentation, please keep yourself muted, but do type those questions into chat. And Mallory, I see your presentation, so thank you for sharing your screen, and we'll let you take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Rebecca. Thanks for having us. I've already let Rebecca know I'm probably going to go a little bit off topic of floatables. I'm going to try to bring it back in, and then Amelia and Myra are going to just bring that all the way back to what we're here to talk about. So I'm here to talk about Oklahoma City's water conservation program. And kind of what we do, a little bit of background information, and also hopefully some helpful information that you all can use in your commercial businesses or even in your homes or industry that you're in. So our department actually provides water, wastewater, and solid waste services to our community. And so we're very spread out, as anybody in Oklahoma City knows, and we have about 1.4 million customers and growing. We also provide water to 18 communities and other water districts in central Oklahoma. And we have over 3,900 miles of pipeline that delivers water to over 200,000 homes and businesses. And so we are treating and delivering about 100 million gallons of water every single day. And so, you know, we're doing a lot kind of in the background to make sure that people have tap water when they turn it on. And so we want to make sure that we keep providing that reliable water service. One thing, a lot of times if we are out and about talking to the community, we ask them where their water comes from, a lot of the times they just mention Hefner. But we actually have 7 water supply reservoirs that we rely on for our supply. And so we have Hefner, Overholser, and Lake Stanley Draper that are within Oklahoma City limits. And then we have Canton that's up in the northwest part of the state that brings water down the North Canadian River. And then we also have Atoka, McGee Creek, and soon to be Sardis Reservoir. And that water is pumped 100 miles uphill into Stanley Draper Reservoir. And so we have a pretty extensive footprint across the state to make sure that we have a resilient water supply, no matter what our conditions, rainfall conditions may be. So in Oklahoma, if you've lived here very long, you know that drought happens in our state, and it may be a flash drought and comes and goes, or it may be a longer term drought situation like we had most recently in 2011, 2012. And so water conservation kind of helps to interrupt that hydrological cycle that it's been called. And so basically we get rain a lot of the times, like we did this spring and summer. We had a really good amount of rain. And so we kind of become apathetic to that rainfall. And then we get a drought situation that starts to occur, similar to kind of what we're going through right now. And then it kind of starts to drive awareness as our reservoirs start to decrease, and you can kind of start seeing the lake beds like this one at Hefner. And so people start to get a little bit concerned. What are we going to do? And then if the drought continues, then people just turn into all outright panic and not knowing what to do. And so conservation and the conservation program helps us to be prepared for those situations so that we have a plan in place so we don't have to get to that panic stage, hopefully. So many of you have probably seen this map half a dozen times in your careers, but I always like to bring this up. So this is our precipitation history for Oklahoma with the 5-year tendencies. And so you can see over time, we've had a lot of drier than normal times in Oklahoma. And so anything below that line is a drier than normal time. Anything above that, or it's signified by the green, is a wetter than normal time. And so there's not really a normal time in Oklahoma, and you can kind of see that on this graph that we're all over the place. And after almost every significant drought that we've had, we invested in and built reservoirs that we have today. And so building reservoirs is very difficult, and it's very expensive, and it takes a lot of land. And so conservation is kind of the next step to make sure that we use the water resources we have wisely going forward. And you can see in our recent history in the 80s and 90s, we got very accustomed to having above amount of rainfall. And so this helps us to always be prepared no matter what the conditions bring. So some of our larger projects I just wanted to talk about. We do have a second Atoka pipeline that is, we're working on currently, and that's going to be parallel to our current Atoka pipeline and help have redundancy in our system so that we can make repairs and make sure our pipeline is working correctly. Another one is a Hefner-Draper interconnect, so connecting our 2 water treatment plants to be able to pump water to the entire city. If one plant happens to go down or needs maintenance, there will be those 2 connected where we can always have water going throughout the whole community. We're also adding some capacity to our water treatment plants, making lots of repairs and improvements, and then also replacing aging water and sewer pipelines so that we have more reliability in our system. So in 2017, our Oklahoma City Water Utilities Trust and the Oklahoma City Council adopted a water conservation plan. And that plan establishes some long-term commitment to water use efficiency and to some of our goals. And it supports the city and state objectives for water conservation, including the Water for 2060 Act, to help reduce use and use no more in 2060 than we did in 2012. And so one piece of that is an ordinance in place. And if you irrigate your yard, or if your commercial business irrigates or your industry irrigates, then you should always be following our mandatory odd and even lawn watering program that we have. And we're always in stage 1, and that helps to manage demand on our system so that we always have pressure available to get water where it needs to go in our spread out system. And then if we ever get into a drought situation and our combined capacity is reduced, then our schedule becomes a little bit more stringent. And so we make sure that this is always in place. We, of course, always hope that we don't have to go to those next stages, but they're there if we need them. So for commercial and industrial water use efficiency, one really cool thing that we do is that we have water meters. And so you can figure out how much water your business or commercial group is using on our portal. So if you aren't the direct contact for getting water bills or anything like that, but water use efficiency might be important to you as a cost saving measure, then you can log on to okcutilities.com or work with the people in your organization who pay the bill and go check out your consumption first so that you can figure out where you are currently and so where you're going to go eventually down the road. And so this is just my plug for the portal, but also this provides some really valuable information for your organization. So after you've got that great information, the next thing that you can start doing is a water survey. And as you can see, starting with an indoor water survey, the toilets and the restrooms are the #1 user of water. And then the next step would be cooling and heating, and then landscaping. And so just collecting that data, figuring out what your water use appliances are, your facility size, make sure you're familiar with what employees are using with water. If you're using water in a commercial sense or to produce a widget, making sure that you're taking inventory of those water use equipment, and then walking through and examining and recording water use. And it's also a really great way to engage your employees in this mission and try to get them on board with finding and fixing leaks and things like that throughout the facility. And so, you know, I always feel like I always have to talk about toilets in my career. I talk a lot about toilets. So, like I just showed you guys in the indoor water survey, restrooms use a lot of water because people are, you know, constantly going in and out. And so a toilet that runs, I mean, it can run at 3 gallons per minute. So if it's just intermittently running half of the day, that's 65,000 gallons of water easily over the month. And we see a lot of that with our residential customers and commercial customers that have a leaky toilet that they didn't know about, and they're losing a lot of water, and that can add up really quickly on your bill. And the same goes with the commercial valves in toilets. Those can age over time and become very inefficient, even if it's stamped at 1.6 gallons per flush, and may actually be using 3 to 5 if that valve is not closing correctly. So the next thing is outdoor water surveys. Irrigation systems are very much overlooked and usually ignored, and one broken sprinkler head can waste about 25,000 gallons of water over 6 months. And we've been doing residential sprinkler checkups now for over a year through our customer service group, and we found that sprinkler systems can use about 12 to 40 gallons per minute. That's a wide range depending on what your pressure is in your system. But it's also a lot of water if you consider how long some of our sprinkler systems run. And so there's always room for improvement in outdoor use. So some of the things to look for common in a sprinkler system are your schedule, some broken stuff, high and low pressure, and misaligned heads. And so I'm going to talk about each of those individually. So it's really important that you have a good schedule, and here's why. So in Oklahoma, your lawn needs about 5 inches of water per month during the hottest month, which is typically July. This year it was not July. It feels like it's going to be September. But that's about 15,000 gallons over a 5,000 square foot yard. If you have gear drive rotors and you're irrigating every other day for 30 minutes, which is a pretty common schedule, you're putting down about 6 inches of water per month. And so you're only overwatering by about 1 inch. But if you have a fixed spray that's actually just pouring water out, those use about 1.5 inches per hour. So if you're doing that every other day on that same schedule for 30 minutes, you're overwatering by over twice what you need. And it's almost, 37,000 gallons over that same amount of yard. And so you're way over irrigating what you need. And so that's where the importance of the irrigation schedule comes into play. The other thing is broken stuff. So everything in a sprinkler system can break. Everything, unfortunately. And so all of those components that are out in the system can break. And so making sure that those are getting checked on a regular basis is very important because that is just constant water that you're losing. And unfortunately, all these pictures are from sprinkler systems in Oklahoma City. And so those are also carrying off all kinds of different chemicals and things too, along with them when they're floating down the street. And so making sure that it's periodically getting checked is really an important piece for those sprinkler systems. The next thing is high and low pressure. So this is an experiment to see if the concrete will grow or not. It's actually to show a pattern of a spray head at different water pressures. So if you have a spray head, it should be operating at 30 PSI. And so you can see in this picture at 30 PSI, that flow is about 3.3 gallons per minute, and it has a nice pattern over the yard. So everything is getting irrigated that you expect. If you're irrigating at a higher pressure, so say 50 psi, that increases the flow to 4.8 gallons per minute. And it also ruins the spray pattern. And so all of that is just either drifting away in the wind, because Oklahoma is never windy here, or it's, it's just evaporating. And so you're not getting the benefits. So people turn up the irrigation schedule when they see brown spots that are in the yard, when it really could be from a high pressure issue. And so if you have 10 sprays on a zone that looks like this, and you swap out those heads for pressure regulated heads or pressure regulation at the valve, you can save 150 gallons every time you water just one small zone. So it can make a huge difference. And if you consider this in a commercial or industrial sized landscape, there's a lot of water savings that goes along with that. The other thing is misaligned heads. We see this all over. Even if you're just driving down the street, you'll see this. And that water hitting the pavement is carrying all kinds of things into the storm drains. And so making sure that they're aligned properly to be on the grass and watering where you want it to be is so important. And also, what's the point of running a sprinkler system if it's not even irrigating the grass that you're paying for? So I did kind of tie this in. I tried, Rebecca. So over irrigation can also wash all those excess nutrients and sediment into our waterways, causing water quality issues. And so, if you're irrigating and fertilizing and putting down pesticides and herbicides, all of that stuff gets washed straight into our stormwater system. And so another thing that we talk about a lot is soil testing before you fertilize. And so this is something that does not get done very often, but it really should, especially if you're applying fertilizer either in your yard or even a commercial landscape. And if you have a contractor who manages that commercial landscape, you can also ask them to do a soil test before they fertilize. And so separating your yard into zones, taking a soil sample from the depth to 6 inches in about 15 to 20 locations, depending on your size, mixing it up and repeating for each area. Then you can just take that off to your local extension office, or sometimes contractors use private labs to get those fertilizer recommendations so that you know what nutrients are in your soil before you apply more. The next thing is protect the soil where it is. And so sediment is a big impairment to our water supply or surface waters. And all of that sediment, again, is just getting washed into our surface water and ends up that we have to treat that to get the sediment back out of the water. And so it's better to keep it in the soil. It's better for your landscape. It's better for your plants. And so protecting that soil where it is, so you're not losing those nutrients and organic matter and adding that sediment load to the water. And unfortunately, we see that sometimes in our sprinkler checkups is that they're, irrigating soil that without any kind of cover, that bare naked soil, and it's just running off down the street. And so that's a loss of those nutrients, and it's a loss of some good organic matter. And it's, horrible for stormwater. So the next thing is if you're, deciding or changing or a part of any kind of landscape, management or changes, even in your home landscape, is to think about the end water requirement and the end input that landscape is going to require. So if you have a landscape that's more native or adapted plants and warm season turf grass like Bermuda grass, that requirement is about 155,000 gallons of water a year. Where if you have a cool season lawn that is only moderately adapted to our climate, especially if it's hot and dry, your lawn requirement's about 231,000 gallons per year. So that's more water that you're going to have to put on that landscape. And just as a reference, in 2019, we had about 285,000 gallons of water just from rainfall. And, you know, assuming that that's not all going to infiltrate into our soils, obviously, but you're meeting much more of that water requirement up front. So all of this to say that, you know, it's kind of a bottom line, and I understand that is the reality for a lot of people. So, but if you're paying the water bill, these are our current water rates. And for residential and for non-residential, we have a tiered system to help encourage that water conservation to keep you out of those higher tiered levels. And so it really makes sense over time. And so our water and wastewater rates are going to continue to be adjusted to make sure that we can meet all of those demands of having such a large system. And so you're going to see savings over time if you implement small changes now. And so water savings, a lot of the time, if it's, you know, hot water, it also means energy savings for a lot of folks as well. So, and this type of water waste is really not helping anybody. It's not helping the person who's using the water, and it's not helping the landscape anyway. And so it makes sense just to go ahead and make those repairs and achieve those water savings. So we can help you guys. If you have an Oklahoma City water utility bill, we might be able to help you either do an indoor water survey, outdoor water survey. And so just shoot us an email, waterconservation@okc.gov, if you're looking for some assistance for water savings. Some other resources for you, EPA WaterSense has a great guide for commercial buildings. Alliance for Water Use Efficiency also has some really great resources on their website. And then, of course, just feel free to email waterconservation@okc.gov. I have a really great team who can come out and help find and, you know, provide some recommendations for water savings. So that's all I have. I don't know if I have time for questions, so I'll let Rebecca come back.
Well, I don't see any questions just yet into chat. Thank you so much for that great information. So just if you can hang around, we'd appreciate it. And we'll let you know a little bit later if we have any questions for you. At this time, Amelia, would you share your screen?
All right. Okay. Everyone see the presentation?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Okay, so again, my name is Amelia Hudson. I am the Compliance Planning Division Manager for Raba Kistner. Raba Kistner is an engineering consulting firm. We are headquartered in San Antonio, Texas, but we have offices throughout the state of Texas, as well as a few other states in the US. I'm a member of our environmental team, and I manage all compliance projects, including permitting for air, water, waste, as well as hazardous materials reporting. In the context of stormwater specifically, I manage stormwater permitting and the development of stormwater pollution prevention plans. Myra, who will be presenting the second half of our presentation, manages ongoing stormwater compliance services for a variety of clients in Texas and Oklahoma. So today we'll be discussing regulations, best management practices, and the future outlook of floatable debris regulations. So first, the basics. Floatable debris. It's generally defined by regulatory agencies as litter and other human-generated pollutants, such as plastic, paper, aluminum cans, construction trash, as well as vegetative debris that float and remain suspended. So essentially, it's anything that can be picked up by stormwater runoff and carried into the nearest water body. Now, there are a number of different reasons why floatable debris is regulated and should be controlled. For industrial facilities in particular, implementing controls has a number of different benefits, and that includes reduction of gross pollutant discharge from the facility, improved water quality in local water bodies there in the OKC area that are used for drinking and for recreation, the protection of local wildlife habitat. The facility can actually realize reduced operational maintenance costs by addressing floatables through daily housekeeping. Can also see a reduction or elimination of potential violations or enforcement actions related to stormwater permitting. And these efforts also show support for the local community by improving the quality and the appearance of the area where the facility is located. So control of floatable debris at sources like industrial facilities is regulated primarily through the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, and state level pollutant discharge elimination system, as well as through stormwater permitting. In Oklahoma, industrial facilities are regulated by the Oklahoma Multi-Sector General Permit, also known as the OKR 05 permit. And among a number of ongoing compliance requirements, one requirement of the permit is that facilities must implement and comply with non-numeric technology-based effluent limits. And those are obtained by implementing control measures to minimize or prevent pollution to receiving water bodies. So one of those non-numeric effluent limits is good housekeeping. And I've referenced the specific section of the permit there. But the permit does include specific requirement for facilities to minimize the potential for waste, garbage, or floatable waste by keeping exposed areas free of such materials or by intercepting them before they're discharged from the site. There's also some additional requirements for facilities that have industrial activities involving pre-production plastics. Things like plastic pellets, small plastic parts that can be picked up by stormwater runoff. And depending on the facility's industrial sector, there may be the requirement to implement some additional technology-based sector-specific measures. In tandem with permitting for industrial facilities, stormwater regulations also exist for municipal separate storm sewer systems, also called MS4s. MS4 is essentially a drainage system owned by a city or other public entity that discharges into local water bodies, waters of the US. So those public entities, like the city of Oklahoma City, have their own permit that they have to comply with, and those typically include specific requirements for floatables controls. So the city has an individual permit that's been issued by the Oklahoma Department of Environmental Quality, and that permit includes, among a number of requirements, these 4 specific requirements related to floatables. So there is a goal of no discharge of floatables other than in trace amounts. The city is required to develop and implement a floatables control program using both source and structural controls. City is also required to execute floatables monitoring by establishing 21 different monitoring stations throughout the city. And lastly, the city is required to remove floatables at those monitoring stations at least twice a year and report the quantities that they've removed to the Oklahoma DEQ. So what exactly has the city implemented to accomplish those requirements in their permit? So they've utilized channel-wide netting, circular outfall netting, storm drain inserts, and debris barriers to capture or contain floating debris. They've also installed floatable debris monitoring stations, and a study is in progress targeting floatables controls. And just as one example, 400 tons of floatable debris was removed from the Oklahoma River in 2019. And public education and outreach is also an important part of preventing floatables from the source. So how do the city's efforts tie back to industrial facilities. The city enforces stormwater permitting and stormwater regulations at industrial facilities, which allows the city to address floatables concerns at those specific sources. By controlling floatables discharges from industrial facilities, those potential sources can be controlled, which will ultimately result in less pollution in the nearby water bodies. So the city does regular inspections at these facilities and can issue violations related to inadequate controls for the prevention of floatables. And common violations at industrial facilities include poor housekeeping in waste storage areas, which you see an example of here. Waste are really the most common source of floatables because most of the trash generated at a facility contains all of those common materials, like you would see in office waste or break room trash, as well as other wastes like plastic and wood scraps. Those waste storage areas, you can see floatables easily blown from that area or picked up by stormwater runoff and discharged off-site if they're not managed properly and if no controls are implemented in those areas. And I know a lot of times when you think about floatables, you think about waste, but it's not just waste that can become floatable debris. Industrial materials, if not stored and managed properly, can also contribute to floatables. So I have a few examples here. The photo on the left is of plastic pellets utilized at a manufacturing facility for making various types of plastic products. So those are very light plastic materials that, you have a spill here, those can easily be picked up by stormwater runoff and discharged off-site. Also, the photo on the right, you see a recycling facility, and recycling facilities process all of those materials that are the most common floatables, like plastic bottles, aluminum cans, paper, cardboard. So again, if not managed properly, those have the potential to be picked up by stormwater runoff. In general, violations related to floatable debris can really all be linked back to a lack of controls. That may include unlidded or open dumpsters, no established housekeeping or litter pickup procedures, and ultimately a lack of employee training regarding the site-specific controls that are implemented to control floatables, as well as just the overall goals of the facility's stormwater pollution prevention plan. So now I'm going to hand it over to Myra. She's going to be discussing some common best management practices to address floatables.
Thank you, Marianne. Stormwater best management practices, also known as BMPs, are control measures that are designed to prevent or reduce the effects of pollutants from industrial stormwater discharges. The appropriate BMP control measure will depend on the facility's activities and the volume of stormwater being discharged. The following BMPs are often used to address floatable debris at industrial facilities. Floatable debris control measures are often include sweeping or physical debris removal by maintenance attendants. The cost of debris removal will depend on the size of the facility and the technology being used. Options range from having maintenance staff pick up litter to mechanical push sweepers to larger vehicle sweepers. Filter socks, shown on the left, are often placed in drainage channels to capture floating debris, and hay bales, seen on the right, are typically placed right before the outfall. Both types of BMPs intercept medium to small size debris and are relatively inexpensive, but they are temporary and do require frequent replacement. They are also not recommended for areas with high volume or high velocity flows. Another option for industrial facilities is litter fencing and netting. which offers an effective semi-permanent solution to capturing debris. While they're not the most cost-effective solution, they can significantly reduce the amount of debris that enters an outfall. Grates and drains are very common throughout multiple industries. They are a more permanent stormwater control, which retains medium to large size debris, and overall have moderate installation costs, but do require little maintenance overall. Storm drain filters, which are sometimes called witch hats because of their shape, can be fitted under existing storm drains. Storm drain filters are very effective at capturing smaller debris, but do require more frequent maintenance, especially during rainy seasons. But even with higher maintenance requirements, the filters have low operational costs. They can be rinsed and reused and can be easily maintained by on-site personnel. Trash racks are designed to retain medium to large size floating debris. They are typically installed into drainage openings or along drainage channels. On the left, a rack has been installed around the opening of a concrete culvert, and in the picture on the right, a trash rack has been placed across an open channel. Trash racks have a moderate upfront installation costs, but are a more permanent structure with relatively little maintenance needed during dry periods. Storm scepters are one of the more technologically advanced BMPs that are currently available to industrial facilities. The size and design of a storm scepter varies from location to location, depending on the volume of stormwater volume of stormwater and types of pollutants that are expected to be captured. But in general, they operate like the one shown in the picture on the left. Water and debris enter the storm scepter. Heavier debris falls to the bottom, while floating debris is stopped by a weir, allowing stormwater that is free of debris to exit on the other side of the storm scepter. And the picture on the right shows the debris that is often left over inside of the storm scepter. Storm scepter installation cost is high, and maintenance costs can also be expensive depending on the clean out of frequency, which is often done on a regular basis by a third-party vendor. This is typical to see at industrial facilities with high outputs of stormwater or floatable debris, and those industrial facilities tend to use this option. Aside from the structural controls that have been mentioned, there are also operational BMPs that can be implemented at little or no cost. This includes implementing a routine maintenance schedule, regularly keeping up with good housekeeping measures such as covering trash bins, and most importantly, training personnel on the BMPs and maintenance procedures for those BMPs that are listed within the facility stormwater pollution prevention plan. In general, all the BMPs that have been discussed are site-specific and should be maintained within the maintenance schedule and procedures that are available in the stormwater pollution prevention plan. In addition, it's also recommended that structural controls be inspected either during or after a significant rainfall event to ensure that they are working properly. Now that we've discussed, current regulations and best management practices, it's important to address the trend of future floatable debris regulations. Based on the overall trend of floatable debris regulations that have been implemented over the last few years, it's very likely that floatable debris will become a national total maximum daily load impairment. At this time, the EPA allows state and local jurisdictions to define the rules and regulations for floatable debris. Since 1996, there have been over 200 water body reaches in 7 states that have been listed in the 303D list for trash, debris, or floatables. To address these impairments, state and local agencies have implemented trash collection programs, debris studies, and outreach and education projects. As for the city of Oklahoma, as most of you are aware, the Oklahoma Stormwater Permit will be renewing in July of next year. And although a permit draft has yet to be released to the public, it is expected that the language of floatable debris will be similar to the current multi-sector general permit. Okay, so this concludes our presentation. If there's some time, we will go ahead and take your questions.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Mallory, Amelia, and Myra. Great presentations and very interesting information. If anyone else has questions, we do have one question, looks like. Chris, would you be able to share that question with us, please?
Yes, the question was from Jamie Moreno. It is, how soon after the implementation of new structural controls should the facility's stormwater pollution prevention plan be updated?
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that question. It's typical to see an update of the SWIP within 6 months of those types of changes.
Cool. Okay, it looks like that's the only questions that we have at this time. And I would add on that for Oklahoma City, you can always pencil in your changes as soon as you implement them, and then make the formalized changes within 6 months, a year, or whatever, kind of make it a more permanent adoption into that program. Okay. We're trying to get one quick thing typed in there. Okay. Up next, our Community Relations Coordinator, Brooke Varick, will provide some informational on our local programs that help we keep our community clean. Brooke is out of the office today, so she's actually provided a recorded presentation for us. And actually, one quick thing, if Amelia, Myra, and Mallory would hang out for just a sec, we'll just keep an eye on chat, and if anyone does have any additional questions for them, we'd be happy to get those answered for you. So without further ado, let me get this shared. We'll hear from Brooke.
Hi, my name is Brooke Varick. I am the Outreach Coordinator for the City Stormwater Quality Program. We're going to go over a couple outreach highlights today before we end our webinar. For our community outreach overview, we do multiple avenues of outreach and education for Oklahoma City. That includes school presentations, volunteer programs, assemblies, school events, different Earth Day celebrations, and distance learning videos and some Zoom classroom visits. Our main goal for stormwater quality is to create and support lessons that meet our current curriculum standards. We want these lessons to teach our elementary and secondary education students about protecting their water resources. Our main topic is only water down the storm drain. The City of Oklahoma City's mission is to protect, maintain, and enhance the environment of the City of Oklahoma City by controlling discharges of pollutants to the city's stormwater system, and to maintain and improve the quality of our lakes, rivers, and streams, in turn affecting our drinking water. For our specific school outreach, we have had to modify because of COVID-19, so we're not allowed to enter any of the schools. No outside personnel are allowed inside the schools. So we've created several virtual lessons that coincide with current curriculum standards. Our virtual lessons are for 3rd through 5th grade. Our 3rd grade lesson is a water quality experiment. Our 4th grade lesson is a sediment erosion experiment. And our 5th grade lesson is a water pollution experiment. So all of these lessons come with an optional take-home experiment kit for the students. The teachers can use them inside their classroom as a hands-on learning opportunity or send them home with the students as a take-home or homework assignment activity. It's just some really great hands-on learning to help solidify the messages from our videos. So we're keeping our outreach opportunities as flexible as possible, and our goal for 2021 is to reach 2,500 students. These are some of our volunteer programs, and I've gone over them in a couple recent webinars, so I don't want to spend too much time on them. But we do have our Adopt a City Street program, our Waterway Clean Sweep program, and our Curbs to Creeks program. If you're interested or your group is interested in volunteering, feel free to reach out to me and we can see on an individual or group basis what program fits your volunteer needs the best. This slide is a little bit old. We did hold a cleanup on September 10th. It was our last Waterway cleanup. It was an open volunteer cleanup. We had a great turnout for volunteers, and we will have the data available soon for that cleanup. But some of our past cleanups and totals are listed. We've had a lot of volunteers participate this year, making a huge difference in the amount of trash in the OKC area and the removal of that trash. So just a huge shout out to our volunteers and what they've done so far this year. For additional information and volunteer opportunity information, feel free to reach out to me. This is my contact info. You can call me or email me and I can answer any questions you have. Thank you for joining today.
All right. Well, if anyone has any questions for Brooke, I've already put her email address into chat in case someone would like to reach out to her a little bit later. We've got plenty of opportunities for people to be involved with keeping litter out of our waterways and getting it out of the waterways that it's already in there. So if you're interested in that, feel free to reach out. We'll be happy to add your volunteer hours to our statistics there. As a reminder, if anyone would like to receive a certificate of attendance for today's presentation, please reach out to Ms. Heavenly. We ask that you don't request that certificates of attendance via chat because we may or may not have your email address associated with your username on Teams. So, sorry, I'm trying to multitask and it's just not working well today. If that works. Oh, that was not the right thing. Let me try it one more time here. Oh, anyway. Know what I did? Okay, there we go. Certificate of attendance. I'm not sure why the font is changing to not be like legible at all, nor helpful. It's not letting me change it. Okay, so sorry if you can't read that very well, but that is Heavenly's email address into chat. And as I've mentioned, a recording of today's presentation will be available on our website in the next week or so. I will put that hopefully into chat soon. Actually, as soon as we get this recording done today, we'll probably have it on the website today. There we go. So that is a link to where our presentations are available on our website. So thank you all for attending today's session. I don't see any questions for any of our guest presenters, any new questions, I guess I should say. So thank you all for attending. I hope everyone enjoyed today's session. We'll see you hopefully next month, October 19th at 1 p.m. for the next installment of the Floatables webinar series. The presentation will be provided by our construction section, headed by Monica Walls, the construction section supervisor. And they will have information on construction type permits and tie that into our floatables theme as always. Hope everyone has a great afternoon. Thank you for joining us.